Well, good morning, everyone. As you know, we're at an interesting time as a church. We've got this wonderful new building kindly provided to us by our friends at the SDA. We've got new people coming. We've got some new ideas about the format of the service, about the way that we can serve into the future. And it's really cool, but there's always a danger, I guess, with churches that there's something called entropy, which, as we know in physics, is in a closed system, less and less energy becomes available over time. So things decay, things rust, things oxidize. And spiritually speaking, a church can very quickly oxidize into sort of ritual and routine and just going through the motions. And I'm sure we've all been in churches like that. And I know that this church is no different to any other church in terms of what the pull might be towards oxidization, towards floating rather than flying, towards existing rather than excelling. And especially when you look at our culture, because everything in our culture is sort of about floating, existing, buying, watching, getting, feeling good, feeling lovely, feeling pleasant. And so things in the church can easily fall back into that rut, that routine. And so I want to ask this morning, how could this little church fly? How could it excel? Maybe it's a dumb, impossible question. I mean, how many churches out there are really flying? In fact, how many Christians are really flying, not just floating, not just existing? I just want to introduce you to two people, and you may wonder, as I did this week, what these two have in common. And this morning on Friday morning, I sent out a text, and the text was for our Friday prayer morning, and it just said, "Good morning, little church," and I gave a little verse, and I mentioned this guy Ittai. And then also this week I saw an article about Kayla Mueller, and I don't know if you guys have actually seen her on the news recently, but it's an amazing story and I really encourage you to read it. But what could a 26-year-old girl from the USA have in common with a 3,000-year-old warrior from ancient narrative? He was one of King David's warriors. What could these two have in common? Well, one thing they had in common was they both made me tear up a little bit. Man tears, I can assure you. But nonetheless, there's just something really moving about the two of them. So first of all, Kayla Mueller, you should know straight away that she is dead. She was kidnapped in Syria by ISIS. President Obama reckons that they missed her by a few days in a special forces raid, just a few days. She had a long record of volunteering abroad, and she was deeply moved by the plight of civilians in Syria's civil war. She was quoted in her local newspaper in 2013, just a couple of years ago, as saying, "For as long as I live, I will not let this suffering be normal. I will not let this be something we just accept." And it's interesting because for the last year, I think 18 months or so, her parents have known that something was dreadfully wrong. They've known that she was kidnapped, and they were not sure for quite some time whether she was alive or dead. And only just now has it been confirmed, and they actually asked for the press to keep things a secret because they feared that ISIS might overreact if she was heavily publicised. So just imagine them living that for so long. Anyway, she worked for a Turkish aid organisation on the Syrian border and volunteered for schools and aid organisations abroad, including the West Bank in India, and that's where she taught English to Tibetan refugees. She wrote a letter while she was in captivity before she was killed, and it got passed on by some fellow prisoners who were later released. And this is, I think, why it kind of just moved me so much, because when I first heard about her, I was in I guess an apathetic or a woe is me or a sad kind of state myself, and I just thought about my own little problems. And this is a great thing about preaching, guys, is never give up on it, whether it's like this from the front or whether it's one-on-one, or when we get into God's word and we preach it one to another, we proclaim it one to another. You don't need a pulpit to do that. You get up out of your own yard, it boosts you up, and you look over the fence and you see the rest of the world. You know, in our own little yard with the walls there, the fences, it's our own horizons, and all this stuff is going on. But when we are preached to in the word or by this amazing testimony, it gets us up over the fence. It gets us to look out over the rest of the yards around us, over the rest of the world's yard, so to speak. It boosts us up and it shows us what we could be. It shows us what else is going on. It shows us what else God is doing and is going to continue to do, taking something special out of something terrible and awful. Anyway, this is the letter that she wrote, and it's to her parents, and you can see it there on the screen. If you could say I've suffered at all throughout this whole experience, it is only in knowing how much suffering I've put you all through. I'll never ask you to forgive me, as I do not deserve forgiveness. I remember Mum always telling me that in the end, the only one you really have is God. I've come to a place in experience where, in every sense of the word, I've surrendered myself to our Creator, because literally there is no one else. By God and by our prayers, I have felt tenderly cradled in free fall. I have been shown in darkness light, and have learnt that even in prison one can be free. I am grateful. I've come to see that there is good in every situation, and sometimes we just have to look for it. I pray each day that if nothing else, you have felt a certain closeness and surrender to God as well, and have formed a bond of love and support amongst one another. I have felt tenderly cradled in free fall. There is something supernatural going on there, guys. Something supernaturally gracious, that she could say those words, that she could care for her parents. Something amazing. So again, what do these two have in common? A 3,000-year-old warrior and called Ittai, not even a cool name like Kayla. What does he have in common with Kayla Mueller? Do you know who Ittai was? And maybe some of you do. He was one of David's warriors. I already said that, but did you know he was a Philistine? One of the sworn enemies of Israel. He was from Gath. That's what a Gittite means, from Gath. He had 600 warriors who came to David. It's strange that he would come. We don't know. We're not really told. But there's many examples in the Bible of non-Jewish people, non-Israeli people coming to worship and to be a part of Yahweh or of God's people. And he had no reason at all to follow. In fact, his culture was not only against the culture of King David, it was sworn to defeat it and to kill it. So it was stranger still that he would stay loyal to David, fleeing in disgrace from his own nation, turned against him by Absalom, his own son. And this is the story from 2 Samuel 15. The NIV Study Bible Notes call it the finest example in ancient literature of narrative anywhere. 3,000-year-old narrative. Here we go. We'll just read some of it. A messenger came and told David, the hearts of the men of Israel are with Absalom. Then David said to all his officials who were with him in Jerusalem, come, we must flee, or none of us will escape from Absalom. We must leave immediately, or he will move quickly to overtake us and bring ruin upon us and put the city to the sword. The king's officials answered him, your servants are ready to do whatever our lord the king chooses. The king set out with his entire household, and just dropping down, all his men marched past him along with the Kerethites and Pelethites, and all the 600 Gittites who had accompanied him from Gath marched before the king. And the king said to Ittai, the Gittite, who was their commander, why should you come along with us? Go back and stay with King Absalom. You are a foreigner, an exile from your homeland. You only came yesterday, and today shall I make you wander about us when I do not know where I am going? Go back and take your countrymen. May kindness and faithfulness be with you. And this is a bit that got me this week. But Ittai replied to the king, as surely as the Lord lives, and as my lord the king lives, wherever my lord the king may be, whether it means life or death, there your servant will be. David said to Ittai, go ahead, march on. Just let those words sink into your soul. Wherever my lord the king may be, whether it means life or death, there your servant will be. That's astounding. A Philistine from Gath. And he says, as surely as the Lord lives, as surely as Yahweh lives, and as surely as my Lord the King lives, wherever my Lord the King may be, whether it means life or death, there your servant will be. And David says, go ahead, march on. So again, I ask the question, what do these two have in common? And it's this verse. And it's not just words on a page. It's this verse. Wherever my Lord the King may be, whether it means life or death, there your servant will be. They both lived it. 3,000 years apart, but they both lived it. Despite everything in their culture, despite all the spiritual dulling that should have soaked into their souls to keep them floating and existing just like everyone else, they proved themselves so much more than their wants, their accepted behaviours, their accepted norms, the expectations of their friends, their colleagues, their society. They followed the king wherever he was, literally, for life or for death. You know, the king was so special to them that whether he happened to be in life or whether he happened to be going to death, that's where they were going to be, because that's where he was. And I'm almost sure that Itai had his pop culture influence, maybe a couple of albums full of barrel rock from the iTunes store, but I am completely sure that Kayla Mueller had hers, because we live in her culture. And that is what makes this stand out remarkable. Remember the letter excerpt I cut from the web and showed on the screen before? Well, here's the rest of the web page in context. And I'll just read you some of the sidebar. This is part of that web page where I got the letter. Pink, fresh and easy. Pink picks up flowers, wearing a comfy poncho as she steps out with daughter Willow in Los Angeles Fresh Flowers. Pierce Brosnan's 18.2 Malibu Dream Mansion sustains $1 million in damage as fire rips through the property's garage while the actor is home with his family. True Detective Colin Farrell bringing the heat. Colin Farrell films intense gunfight in downtown LA for HBO's True Detective Guns. Sarah Jessica Parker at the Tome for 2015 at the New York Fashion Week in New York City. Back on, Khloe Kardashian looks fetching in sheer black top as it's revealed she's been enjoying cozy nights at a secret hotel. Really? On the same page? It just shows the schizo nature of our world sometimes. But that was the culture that Kayla came from. And that's astounding. She came from this. A little slide. The three biggest fears of our generation: low Wi-Fi, slow computer connection, and a low battery. Well, I know it's satire, but it all has a spirit of truth in it, doesn't it? What were her fears with ISIS getting off the plane, those initial hours of being kidnapped? It just puts it all into context. And here's a little picture of a hotel room that I often stay at when I'm out on the road. I just go past this window and I look at it and it says, Little Miss Packages Treatment Room, Little Miss Precious. She came from the Little Miss Precious culture and she left it. But you could say, well, she was a church girl. Well, what's our church culture up to at the moment? I went through this only a few months ago when we did our Why Are We Here sermon. And we saw some of the things that the church is really good at. But she came from a church culture that is building a lot. And again, remember the bathroom I told you about? It was sensational. It was bigger than this church building. Marble everywhere. Beautiful taps. Nice posters and pictures and art on the walls. She came from that kind of church culture. She came from a church culture with lots and lots of people writing and lots of books. There's probably even a book coming out about the fact that there's too many books. Well, there should be. Maybe I'll write it. And that's not even mentioning all the blogs and podcasts and everything else. She came from a church culture that is doing lots of conferences, lots of get-togethers. There's conferences happening all the time now, putting on awesome shows. A church culture that's lots and lots of counselling going on, lots and lots of therapy. A church culture where there's a lot of criticising of each other. There's a lot of butting of heads. She came from a church culture that really, when you think about it, on the outside, looks kind of nice, looks kind of interesting, but you can't help wondering what is behind the facade. What kind of emptiness is there? What kind of lack of heart, what kind of lack of power is there really behind all of this? And yet out of that Little Miss Precious culture, out of that therapeutic feel-good church culture, at the end of her young life in prison, she was able to write, I remember my mum always telling me in the end, the only one you really have is God. I've come to a place in experience where, in every sense of the word, I have surrendered myself to our Creator. I have felt tenderly cradled in free fall. This week I listened to this album by Matt Papa, Look and Live, and there's a profound line. It says, I was born on a planet of empty wells. I was born on a planet of empty wells. Think about that. So the whole picture is this dry, dusty planet. There's all these wells, and each time you go to a well, you look down and it's empty. And you think, I'll go to another well, and it's empty as well. It's such a rich metaphor. And the truly heartbreaking specialness of Kayla was that from her own world of empty wells, she managed to bring a cup of water to the people of Syria. How? And men, it was a young girl that the world now wonders at. It was a young girl who wrote, I have felt tenderly cradled in freefall, imprisoned by an organisation known for its beheadings and for its public burnings. It was a young girl. Wherever you will be, whether life or death, there your servant will be. And this brings me to another question. If that's what they had in common, then the next question that should come to us is this: why can't we? Why can't we have the same heart and power? Why can't we have the same heart? Now, I'm not talking about the same circumstances. I would be worried and scared about having to go and do that kind of thing that she was called to. But I'm talking about whatever heart it was that took her there. What if we had the same heart? What if we had the same conviction, the same commitment, the same failure is not an option perseverance? If we had the same heart in our street or across the Colorbond fence, or when World Vision advertised, or when the prayer request came in, or when the church request for help came in, or across the workstation, or just across the table to our family when it's tense. Just imagine how this church would fly if we had a heart like that. And why can't we have the same power as Kayla or an Ittai? The power to overcome fears and doubts, the power to actually get on the plane and go. And make no mistake, there was extraordinary power at work here. The power to change and redeem and restore, and the power to ultimately glorify the King that she served. It's amazing to me that just one girl, despite all the church kind of stuff that goes on, one girl could so bring glory to Jesus. Why can't we? It's a massive question for us. It's a massive question. You know, there are many church growth metaphors. There are gardens, there are buildings, there are boats and ships that are used oftentimes to talk about the church and its growth. I'd like to use an aeroplane because I'm a pilot. But before we go there, again, I just want to ask, if this little church could fly with heart and power like Kayla, like Ittai, imagine that. Imagine that with our kids, our friends, our wife, our husband, our mum, our dad, when we're tired, upset, cranky. Imagine the heart and power in my kids are going crazy, I need help. The heart and power in my brothers and sisters at church just don't get me, they've annoyed me, they've upset me, they don't see my need. Or imagine the heart and power in Friday prayer mornings, the call for help, and the heart and power in love for moving someone, mowing old ladies' yards, cleaning their house. Imagine heart and power in speaking and standing with grace and truth where we earn our dollars. You know, I think of my own lack of heart and power this week, and I compare it to this, and I'm so glad that I saw this story of Kayla, and I'm so glad that I saw this picture of Ittai in the Bible, because it pushed me up out of my own little sorry backyard and made me look, made me see what there could be and what there is. And you know, she wrote other stuff too. She talks in this letter about a man searching for his Syrian, in the news actually, not the letter, a man searching for his Syrian family after their refugee camp in Turkey was bombed, and he was reunited with a 6-year-old thanks to Kayla Mueller. After looking frantically for missing family members, he eventually found an 11-year-old girl alive at a hospital, but learned his wife had died and could not find the boy. The man turned to Mueller, who works in Turkey with an agency called Support to Life. He gave her an image of the boy, and she later found him after he came out of surgery. Wow. As part of her work, obviously written before she died, Mueller draws, paints and plays with Syrian children in the refugee camps and helps with social interventions. We give and get joy from playing with these children. I think of my own issues this week, and I think of my own complaints, and I just go, really? Imagine the heart and power in that girl. And again, I'm not saying I want the same circumstance. I'm just saying, imagine the heart and power that she had. Imagine it in our little church. Imagine how it would fly. Look at this plane that I put up on the screen. It's beautiful. It's sleek. It's aerodynamic. But what's wrong with it? What's missing? It's been engineered almost to perfection. Well, what normally goes where the broken bits are? Yep, the engines. And I kind of think this is it helps me understand in some ways where we could be negatively as a church, and maybe where many churches are. Many churches are aerodynamic and sleek and shiny, but here's the thing. It doesn't matter what you do with this plane in order to make it aerodynamic and sleek and shiny. Without engines, it will never fly. It just never will. You can make a plane super aerodynamic, but it will never fly without engines. But here's the thing. Here's an interesting thing. You can take almost any hard structure and give it engines and it will fly. In fact, during the Vietnam War, there was a famous aircraft called the F-4 Phantom, and they nicknamed it the Brick because the idea was that even a brick will fly if you give it big enough engines. And I kind of think that's a cool metaphor for us because we're all kind of bricks, aren't we? And yet, if we have big engines, even bricks can fly. Even bricks can fly. And so, let's just have a bit of a think about this metaphor for a minute. What are the engines of change, of redemption, of restoration that have always had propulsive power in the church? Do you remember our Why Are We Here sermon? Do you remember the key verses from the study in Jesus in Mark? Remember how I went through the whole of Mark in one sermon? It was a 6,000 foot kind of view. But do you remember the first part was Jesus serving and loving and preaching? And in one particular story, a teacher of the law comes to him, and I'll just read it from Mark 12:28-34. One of the teachers of the law came and heard them debating. Noticing that Jesus had given a good answer, he asked him, of all the commandments, which is the most important? The most important one, answered Jesus, is this: Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength. And the second is this: love your neighbour as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these. And then we read on about Mark 10:45, for even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. The Son of Man did not come in the King James version to be ministered to, but to minister and to give his life as a ransom for many. And so we came up and we said that this little church should be about what Jesus was about. And why are we here? We are here, we said, to love and to serve. We are here to love, we are here to serve, just like our King. If we're going to be where our King is, then we're going to be loving, we're going to be serving. And we might easily think, well, that is the two engines, and certainly in the church, in history, when the church has been loving and serving with words and with actions together, bringing the great gospel truth, not just with the mouth, but with actions, it has grown phenomenally, even under extreme pressure and cruel persecution. It has grown. But that was not the power. That was symptomatic of the power. So what really was the power? I think before we go there, we need to remember what Jesus said he will do with his church. Well, what did he say? Did he say it will dwindle in size as its conferences, book sales, and therapy sessions get even more numerous? Did he say it'll struggle along with 10% of the people doing 100% of the work? Did he say it'll be less loving, less serving, less attractive, less fun than the average footy club? No, that's not what he said. This is what he said to Simon when Simon Peter says, you are Christ, the Son of the living God. And then Jesus says, blessed are you, this is Matthew 16, verse 16, blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by man, but by my Father in heaven. And I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock, so on this proclamation that Christ is the Son of the living God, the gospel truth on Jesus, I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome. The gates of Hades will not overcome it. That means in loving and serving, Jesus has said there will be growth. It's a design specification. He has said it, I will build my church. So if it isn't growing, if it isn't being built, if it isn't propulsing forward, then there's something wrong. And I just want to say a word on the gates here, the gates of Hades. I always used to think Hades was just hell, and in some Bibles it is just actually as hell. But Hades and hell are two different words in the Greek, and Hades is generally meant the place of suffering and death, the place of darkness. And the gates in any ancient city was actually the center of power, because that's where all the commerce tended to happen. That was where decisions were made at the gates. So sort of like a parliament house almost. So when Jesus says, I'll build my church and the gates of Hades will not overcome it, that means the command center of death and suffering, the command center that this world's culture is bringing to people as they chase after empty wells, it won't stand against the church. That's what Jesus has said. He has given the church the keys of an everlasting kingdom. And that everlasting kingdom is supposed to be pushing forward into the death and dying kingdom, where relationships and hopes and dreams and people are dying. And instead, the kingdom of life comes and brings restoration, redemption, as people love and serve and grow. So we are here to love, we are here to serve, we are here to grow. And when we think about a Kayla and an Ittai, again, the question is, why can't we? Why can't we have the heart and power of Kayla or of an Ittai? Why can't we, when what we've seen in the first 6 chapters of John is the extraordinary things of God that are coming for us? The extraordinary person of God in Jesus that is coming for us. Do you remember? And this is the real stuff, guys. This is the real deal. These aren't just words to be exegeted and blogged and podcasted and commented on and then commented on again. They're to be lived. So why can't we, when we see the power and the heart of Jesus Christ as God, the real King of Kayla and Ittai and this little church and all of you? Do you remember John 1? In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. Why can't we have heart and power when he has come for us? When the one we love and serve in and for and through is the one who had the heart and the power to string DNA together, to string you and me together, who energizes light, who puts chlorophyll in plants, the fastest light energy chemical converter known to man. That's Jesus. The one through him all things were made. Imagine the heart and power behind that. And then he says, we've got heart and power. He's given us heart and power to make us his family. He has the heart and power to make us his family. It says in John 1:12, yet to all who received him, to all those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. I just remember I come from a family where we've adopted kids, and my mum and dad, and I love them. They've adopted Down syndrome boys, and adopted my sister Tiana. They brought them in. They had heart and power. Heart and power. It's an interesting thing, because sometimes we can say in church circles, oh yeah, we love you. But can we say my heart is for you? And I'm working for you. That's literally what it means to have heart and power. That is what Jesus did. He didn't just come and talk. He came with heart and power. His heart was for us. His power was for us. And then he says that he has heart and power to give us grace and truth. 1:14, we have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. Sometimes we might have grace but no truth. Sometimes we've got truth and no grace. And I heard it put so well this week by a preacher. Truth is like gravity. A little boy or a little girl could be running to the cliff, and gravity isn't going to go on that particular day. Oh, well, you're a little girl, you're a little boy, I'll just give you a break today. I won't do my thing. No, it's cruel and it's harsh. They will fall and plummet, probably to their death. That is truth. Truth has no grace. It has no feeling. It has no empathy. It has no empathy. And yet, aren't you glad that God was full of grace and truth? There is a very real cliff. And yet, he has given us grace to avoid the cliff. He is full of grace and truth. So, why can't we have heart and power like that? Especially when we see that the heart and power of our King gave up pleasure and power of heavenly realms for dirt and grime. This week I was speaking to Rudgy, and we just sort of suddenly said, what if John Calvin had to swap with Daniel Rudge right now? What if John Calvin had to live a week, or in fact just a lifetime, would he have written the same way that he wrote? Well, what if one of our pulpit heroes had to swap with Ian at Master High, or John Piper at Master High for a week, or for a month, or for a lifetime? Would he write the same way, living in Toowoomba? I don't know, just think about it. But the earthy power of the gospel is you get to see what would happen when God gets swapped from heaven to earth, from the cosmos to Judea, from heaven to Master High. That's Adrian's very rough Greek interpretation. What does happen? Well, we see him with standout, remarkable heart and power to love and to serve. And again, why can't we? Remember John 2:11, the first of his miraculous signs Jesus performed at Cana in Galilee. He thus revealed his glory. That was hospitality 101. He provided the wine for the wedding guests. Do not underestimate the power of hospitality, opening up your home, opening up your living space and inviting people into it. Giving of yourself. Heart and power to look after the wedding guests even. And then the temple junk. Remember what happened there? John 2:17, his disciples remember that it is written, zeal for your house will consume me. Jesus went in there and tore apart the money changers, the tables full of goods and consumerist zeal. It wasn't a match for the zeal of the Son, for the Father's house, heart and power. We can't even get out of bed sometimes to come to the Father's house. Oh, that we would have such zeal. And then John 3, heart and power to teach a Pharisee the most famous words from the Bible. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, shall not decay, but have eternal life. Amazing heart and power behind that. His heart is for us. His power is for us. Then John 4, the heart and power for the 5 times deserted woman at the well. So kind to her, so gentle. He looks after her when no one else would, when they would have just turned away, not even spoken to her. And in that dusty place, he speaks the words of life to her. And he says, anyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again, but whoever drinks the water I give him will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give him will become in him a spring of water, welling up to eternal life. Think of that, like not a stagnant pool, not a pond growing over with scum, a spring of water, flowing water, rushing water. What a beautiful picture and metaphor of spiritual power from God within us. Why can't we? Well, we might say, look, it's Jesus. But he says the spring of living water is for us. And then he says that God's heart and power is seeking spirit and truth worshippers. 4:23. Yet a time is coming, and has now come, when the true worshippers will worship the Father in spirit and truth, for they are the kind of worshippers the Father seeks. The heart and power of God is seeking worshippers of the heart, not of the mouth, not of the reputation, not of the Facebook profile. No, the spirit and truth worshipper. That's what he's seeking. His heart and power is seeking that. And then at the end of John 4, the heart and power of Jesus healing an official son, despite his own hometown of Capernaum just recently despising Jesus and turning against Jesus. And there he is, so kind to heal from a distance, a remote healing. And then John 5, the heart and power of Jesus healing a man on the day of rest. And then the Pharisees plot and scheme to kill him. And instead of just wiping him out, he dialogues with them, full of grace and truth, heart and power for them. And he says, you have sent to John, and he has testified to the truth. This is in 5:33. And then in 5:34, he says, not that I accept human testimony, but I mention it that you may be saved. He says to them, the ones that want to kill him, I mention this to you that you may be saved. Heart and power for them. Heart and power for ISIS-hearted Pharisees. And then we're up to John 6, just recently. Remember the heart and power that feeds 5,000 out of his own sadness. Remember, he just heard that John the Baptist was dead. He'd just been rejected from his hometown. He'd been super busy saving the world. People just think he's a super prophet, but he's fed them, and probably all the kids and women who would have totaled 20,000. And then the lake and the storm, and he strides across 5 kilometers of water to rescue his disciples. And then he preaches on bread, heart, and power. He says, I am the bread of life. It will be to you living bread. It will be to you sustenance, spiritual sustenance. It will cause you to live eternally. And then he says in 6:44, no one can come to the Son unless the Father draws. So the heart and power of God drawing, because we need intervention. We need him to save us from our crippled, distracted, easily pleased wills. And then what does he get at the end of chapter 6? We went through it only a few weeks ago. Desertion. And yet he won't desert them or us. He will go to the cross and he will experience the ultimate desertion when the Father turns away from him, so that we don't ever have to be deserted. Heart and power all the way to the cross. And we might well say that, well, that was beautiful, but the thankfulness isn't enough in me. It just won't last till Monday. It won't last to Tuesday. Well, then we need to remember the heart and power of this last meal promise that he made at the last meal, the greatest heart and power promise ever. John 14:15-18. We're going to get to this in a few months. If you love me, you will obey what I command, and I will ask the Father, and he'll give you another what? Another book to read? Another podcast? Another vidcast? Another webinar? Another conference? Another therapy session? No. I will give you a counselor, the Spirit of truth, to be with you forever. I will not leave you as orphans. I will come to you. So think about this. In some spectacular way, God is going to come to us through the Spirit. And he says that the very heart and power of Jesus is going to be with us, so that we're not going to feel like orphans. So here at Greenwater Street, at Glenvale, at you guys sitting in the chairs, and me here behind this wooden bit, we are going to have the very heart and power of Jesus. That is so special. Have you heard of a fate worse than death, guys? You know, in the movies, they play it up. Normally it's to do with torture or whatever. Well, in the church, there is a fate worse than death. It is to become routine, going through the motions, dull-eyed, dull-hearted religiosity, churchianity, churchdom. That is worse than death, because you still have the name of Jesus and you're just dragging it through the very boring, dull mud. That is a fate worse than death in some ways. And why? Why can't we have heart and power when we have this spectacular promise from the one with massive heart and power himself? He says this in John 14:12-13. I tell you the truth, anyone who has faith in me will do what I've been doing. He will do even greater things than these, because I am going to the Father, and I'll do whatever you ask in my name, so that the Son may bring glory to the Father. Think about that, even greater things than these. Just don't scoot over those verses because they're hard. Think about them. Let them soak into your soul. He says even greater things. Now, some theologians have said that just means, Jesus sort of was locked into Judea mostly. And as the Holy Spirit comes and the gospel comes, it goes out to the ends of the world. So in a way, that's greater. But really, I just think it's a bit more than that, because he says here that we will do even greater things than that. He said that we're getting the Spirit, the same Spirit that he has, the same heart and power that he has. So why shouldn't we be hearing the crackle of God's super energy over us, enabling us to love and to serve? And I'm not just talking about miracles. Yeah, miracles will be great, but I'm talking about just everyday life lived supernaturally, lived in an astounding way, a standout, remarkable way, like we see with Kayla, like we see with Itai, like just in the everyday things. Loving, serving, wherever Jesus is, that's where we are. Why can't we? And I haven't answered it. I deliberately haven't answered this question. Why can't we have the heart and power that they had? I want you to go away and pray about that, to seek God. It's not going to be found in more preaching, more podcasts, more videos, more therapy sessions, more books. It's going to be found on your knees before the Lord, asking him, why can't we? Why can't I have this heart and power? Why can't I be where you are? Little church, why can't we have heart and power? Why can't we fly? School of Ministers, why? Glow, KYB, men, women, Sunday church, Monday morning ministers, because all of you will be at school, at work, at home. Why can't we have heart and power to endure, to thrive, to endure again, to surge, to repent, to love, to limp over and help someone who's hurt, to commit, to fall, to stumble, to get up again. Heart and power. Please don't say you're too busy or too tired or too hurting or too this or too that. He said, Jesus has said, our King has said, he has asked the Father to give us his own heart and power, his own spirit. Just take this to him in prayer and genuinely ask, why can't we have heart and power for our precious friends, our precious family, for our city, for our world? Remember what's been done. Remember the cross. Kayla took a cup of water from a planet of empty wells. How? She had a spring of living water. And you do too. So why can't we?